Let's start, though, with China. The country is committing genocide against its Muslim minority population, according to a new report. The legal analysis also finds the Chinese government is breaching every single provision in the Genocide Convention. The Canadian government says it will review the report carefully, but to date, it has yet to declare the mass detainment and human rights abuses against Uyghurs constitutes genocide. My next guest served as the head of the UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda during the brutal 1994 genocide in that country. Retired Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I wanted to start off as someone, of course, who has borne witness to a genocide. You've seen the report published yesterday. Do you agree with the conclusion it reached?
It is with great chagrin that I must say yes. The similitude between what happened pre-genocide in Rwanda and what I've been seeing over the last nearly 2 years going on in China are so blatant. And yet we're 25, 26 years later, we've got responsibility to protect. We have a number of studies. We've been conscious of these massive abuses of human rights that do ultimately constitute genocide. We've had enough of the International Tribunal to tell us about that. And yet self-interest and a lack of wanting to take the risk of holding accountable great nations who do horrible things is still prevalent.
You sound frustrated.
Well, I've got other words that I could give you that reflect something that simply is so visceral in the nature of our humanity and the hypocrisy of our humanity. We talk of human rights on one side. We even have our own charter of human rights, yet we are aware that other human beings, they're just as human as us. I mean, all humans are human. There's not one that's more human than the other. We can absorb, we can negotiate, we can fiddle, we can maneuver on the periphery. And an example of that is the debate on the Olympics. Mm-hmm. I think this is rather interesting because if in 1936 we had known the extent of how the Jewish community and other communities were being abused already by that regime, would we have given in to participating at a event that is supposed to provide a high watermark for a nation in the face of the world? I think probably we wouldn't. So why are we participating in this one?
So you think that, for example, Canada should not be participating in the Olympics taking place in Beijing in 2022?
Well, there's no logic to it. There's no continuity. It's as if the human rights, it's as if the abuse of human rights, because it's far away, because it's hidden in some obscure corner that we know nothing of, it's as if it doesn't hold the credibility of, look at the destruction of human beings in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the whole ex-Yugoslavian campaign. You know, during the Yugoslavian campaign, ex-Yugoslavian campaign, we poured 67,000 troops there. I couldn't even keep 450. And I had more people killed, injured, raped, displaced, and refugeed than the whole campaign in Yugoslavia. Why? Because we make an assessment of the value of human beings, not on the fact that we're all equal.
And in the case specifically of China, what do you think is informing that assessment? Why do you think governments like the one in this country have yet to act on those calls of genocide?
Self-interest. And that's been the breakdown of even the great reform that was brought in by Kofi Annan, the only one that got accepted, in fact, in 2005. And Paul Martin gave an incredible speech in the General Assembly in September 2005 on the responsibility to protect that Canada led the world in saying that states are not sovereign. The individual human being is sovereign. And so when there's massive abuses of human rights by a state, or a state can't stop it, we all have the responsibility to go in and protect them. We signed up to it. The world signed up to it. There isn't one country who has pursued aggressively that campaign through all the 6 different phases of it, which in the end includes, in the end, only in the extremists, the use of force. There's a whole panoply of things that we could be implementing. People don't even want to use the term response. And so when I was working with Dr. Frank Chuck at the Montreal Institute of Genocide Studies, we produced a book called The Will to Intervene. How do you operationalize a theory, a doctrine that could, in fact, protect us from and prevent mass atrocities? And apart from Samantha Power, and the National Security Advisor at the time to Obama, she took up 3 of our recommendations. The rest of the world just lets it go by.
What do you think as a Canadian? I mean, there is, in this country, certainly the government and other governments too have touted us as a leader on human rights. This government has expressed a lot of concern and condemnation for the actions that are taking place there. As I said, though, it won't go that step in labeling it genocide, and then there are no details of what actions might be pursued as a result. If you were in the room with the Prime Minister, what would you be telling him?
Well, having had the opportunity, but not on this subject, I was mostly on subject of another massive use of human rights, which is the use of children as weapons of war, child soldiers. But on this one in particular, I argue that it seems to me that, yes, contrary to what the Economist article said, it seems to me that a coalition of middle powers, 15, 20 of the middle powers of the world, can in fact influence the big powers ultimately, and can bring a sense of, how do you say, control, if not of imposition, of near embargo type of state against a country. So we don't need the big guys only to do it, but the middle ones, us, Canada, in the lead of middle powers, we could create a coalition that can build a momentum in the world.
There is a lot of analysis out there that part of the reason for the hesitation could be the retribution that we've faced already from China, the fact that Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have been detained for more than 2 years. What do you say in response to that? So we might be hedging our actions when it comes to this declaration of genocide because of concerns around retribution from China. What is your response to that?
You're either a great nation that believes in its values and in what its flag stands for and what so many have died to defend it and so on. You're either that or you're not. That is to say, in my humble opinion, there is an absence of statesmanship around the world. COVID-19 has proven it also. Statesmanship, rising above those concerns that you've just articulated and having the humility, having the courage, having the flexibility, having the ability to influence and to sustain risks for the good of humanity. That just doesn't seem to be there no matter what we're writing. And so until we see some of that, I fear that even COVID, in my opinion, took a hell of a lot more casualties than it had to, because we just don't have the ability to have great statesmanship rise above nationalism, self-interest, and actually look at humanity as a one.
And how does it feel to have lived through that so intimately in 1994 and still see it play out again today?
Well, I'm going to take my 9 pills today again. And I'm saddened that lessons that were learned and articulated, laws that were passed, processes that were established like the International Tribunal and so on, seem to be the only tools after the fact that can be used or people have courage to use, not before, not in preventing something going catastrophic, and too often during well, we sort of wait until the thing really nearly run its course before we actually intervene. That is my greatest sadness. And I see myself still standing there with no reinforcements and no food, no ammunition, nearly no communications, and just watching bodies float down and realizing that there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of troops that could have come to support us, and diplomats could have come to prevent it from happening in the first place.
Do you think the Canadian government needs more than the report that was produced yesterday to make a declaration of genocide, or is that enough evidence?
Oh, I think that it's interesting because there's even a debate whether or not you can call it genocide unless you have an actual legal discussion or a legal decision in a court to be able to use the term genocide, which is absolutely preposterous. I think there's a need for a very reinforced diplomatic corps in this country to show the innovation, to show the gumption, to show the ability to go beyond the call of a nation that we are, and punch way above our weight, because we're not doing that enough now, if at all. And so I think we did in the past, and I would just love to see our diplomatic corps regain that stature and help guide the politicians down this road.
And by that, do you mean as a first step, make that declaration?
It's close to me. We recognize the Rwandan genocide of the Tutsis. That was there in the House of Commons. It was wonderful, a lot of fun doing that. We've had the vote, and of course, cabinet, because of its executive responsibility, decided not to vote, because if it did, then it would have been a governmental sort of decision, or at least extrapolated to that. I think that Canada could move that way, but not to do it alone. Canada must build a coalition of a whole bunch of other like-minded middle powers to make pressure in order to influence the capability, both economic and political, surrounding China. And that includes, in middle power, I'll give you an example, that includes countries that receive a lot of resources, financial, from China, from also participating in this coalition of condoning these actions by the Chinese.
Okay, General Dallaire, I've taken a lot of your time. I do appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking me.
Appreciate it. Thank you. That's retired Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.